All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for joining us for our third advising town hall. And just to remind you that this is being recorded because we have been uploading those to our advising website for those who are unable to attend. And then due to the large number of participants, if you do have any questions, if you'll just make sure that you type your name in the chat box, and either myself or Dr. Smith will try and catch that so we can address any questions that you might have as we go through some of our topics. So today we're going to be discussing a few things, and we do actually have our guest Rick Sparks, who actually just joined our Zoom call here. That we'll be talking about. And I think, Kim, did you have that resource that you wanted to talk about first, or did we want to go ahead and talk about Zoom?
Let's see. Well, we'll just go ahead and get started because I promised Rick he would be able to go first. And I'm just going to share screen. Oh, can you let me share it, or do I send it to you?
Nope, you go for it. I just fixed it.
Okay. So I have received a number of questions from folks about the new presidential policy memorandum that came out, 309, that really dealt with how we were going to operate as an institution. And they kind of discussed, he proposes or established three different sort of levels or conditions, and where advising might fall within this process and what it means for us. And so I had asked Rick if he would help us out by explaining this a little bit, particularly as it relates to academic advising.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start, actually, Kim, would you scroll up into the body of the memo? And I think we're on the third, right there. So as you roll through this, and of course you can read this on your own, and many of you probably already have. But if you haven't, if you take a look at number 2, which is on your screen right there, this is talking about categories for employees. And every single department head and dean, vice president had to go through and classify all of their employees in these 5 areas. And you can see them. They're on campus and they're needed to stay on campus. That they were on campus, but they didn't necessarily need to be on campus, telework, and then on call or on leave. These were originally set, I'm gonna get my dates wrong, but at least a week ago, I'm gonna say about a week ago, maybe, prior to us moving to essential. So every employee is classified within one of these 5. My assumption is 99% of you, of us, because I'm with you, is at number 3 at the moment. You've been marked as telework. You're doing your job full time, but you're doing it from a remote location, doing it from your home. Okay. So if you read the sentence that's right below those 5, it says designated employees those who are reported in categories 1, 2, and 3 and are associated with an essential function as described in table 1. So Kim, if you don't mind, just go down to the attachment to this policy, and that's this. This will go through, and it's broken into a lot of different areas. But it goes through a reduced operations, which is where we are technically at the moment, where we have been. Essential operations, which is what we're shifting to tomorrow. And then finally, a state that we have not used yet for this incident, and that's closure. Something that I should have said from the top, and I apologize, this policy was really written, yes, to handle COVID-19, but it was written to be able to be used in the future. If there's other reasons that we have to move to reduced essential or closed operations, this gives us guidance as to who does what then. But anyway, back to the chart that Kim's got up right here, you'll see those 3 levels. You'll see the broad area, and in the very first one is instruction. And then underneath instruction, and this is true of both reduced operations and essential operations, if you look underneath organizational units, the last one before you get to the criteria for scaling is college advising. Okay, and so that's true for reduced, that's true for essential. So I think the question that Kim was getting a lot is, as advisors, are we essential? Are we marked as designated employees? And so the answer to that is absolutely yes. This policy outlines it. It's true for reduced, it's true for essential. You'll see that it does go away for closure, but I want to call your attention to the fact that closure is such an extreme step for the institution that that's the point where we're even not offering instruction, or if we're offering instruction, it's at a very limited basis. And so if you think about this extreme scenario that would have to exist for us not to provide instruction, I hope that gives you a little bit of a comfort, because it's not saying that, well, in a closer setting, advisors just aren't needed. No, what it's saying is in the closer setting, we're not going to really even be teaching. And if we're not teaching, then yeah, we're probably not going to need advising. But at that point, we've got no revenue. That is an extreme. We've used closure in the past, but we've typically used it for a day, maybe 2 days. And you know this every winter when there's a weather event. We'll go to closure. We're not necessarily working. Most of us are probably doing something on the side as far as email, but we're not in the office. And then a day later, we're open again. Closure in this sense is for an extended period of time where we are just shut down as an institution. So hopefully, I got the sense that the questions were coming from a little bit of I'm not sure where I fit. What does all this mean in light of a lot of people losing jobs? What does it look like? And so it's coming from that I'm not sure what's going on, which I get completely. But this policy, I hope, should set some of those fears at ease, because you absolutely are in here as an essential operation.
And Rick, can you
So,
just speak for a second on essential does not mean, well, you can work remotely and be essential?
Yeah, so essential is an unfortunate word, because it sounds like, well, gosh, that's key to running their operation, right? I think research is dealing with this a lot right now, because they have been having to decide what's essential research and what's not essential research. And so folks that do research are saying, well, hey, all research is essential, right? I mean, how could you say it's not essential? So it's kind of an unfortunate word, but it does tie to some language that's used around the state level, in in categories of employees. So that's where it comes from, because it is embedded in state code. But essential is not necessarily a determination of the work that's being done. So any unit or work that is listed in reduced and not listed in essential is not it's not the institution making the determination whether the work is quote unquote important or not, or where those folks that do that work are valued, because they absolutely are. So it is an unfortunate word. I think there's been some confusion on the grad side around essential. There's certainly been some confusion around research around essential, but it's meant to be a category for a scaled down operation, and not a value of worth.
Awesome.
I help.
Yes, I think it helps a lot. Are there any other questions folks might have before Rick leaves us? And I can't see my chat box for whatever reason, Lauren. No questions?
See nothing.
Okay. Well, if any other questions come up, Rick, I will just collect them and shoot them back to you. But I appreciate you coming and helping to provide some more clarity around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've hit all your FAQ questions that have come up around grade mode and everything else as you've been emailing them to me, Kim. But if there's others, let me know.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate you.
Cool. Thank y'all.
All right. Take it away, Lauren.
All right, perfect. So one of the other things that we were going to talk about is the security of Zoom, meaning that there have been instances where individuals have been joining others' Zoom meetings who are not necessarily part of those meetings. And so I'm going to copy a link into the chat box just to provide let me change this. some information that I found directly from Zoom, and it does talk about using things that I think we have already addressed in some form or another, but using a virtual waiting room. You also have the opportunity to uh, have people not be able to share their screens, and using some of those features that are already built into Zoom to make sure that individuals are not joining your meetings when they're not supposed to be. Because I think there have been instances that has taken place across campus already. So just be kind of on the outlook when you're doing that, especially with individual advising appointments with students, that you might look into that and change any of your settings that you need to as an individual on your back end. We have also put a short video on how to set up the virtual waiting room to your own account on our virtual advising resources page for advisors as well. Super easy. You just have to scroll through all the settings to find it, to enable it if it isn't already. Has anybody had any issues or have any questions related to Zoom so far that you want to bring to this group, or any concerns?
I really, I haven't had any issues myself, but I like that resource that you provided. I think there are a lot of options there that I didn't even know existed, or functionality within Zoom. So that's very helpful. I guess it's a matter of me sitting down and actually reading it and being prepared to be able to execute any of those should I have a disruption to occur. So thanks.
Mm. All right, well, I don't see any questions coming up in the chat. And it looks like it's working for everybody, because I'll say I haven't personally had any issues, but just wanted to throw that out there as a resource. And Karen, I will send this out over email as well. So, all right. So the next piece that was asked to talk about within this town hall, and I think I saw Tasha from Engineering Ed come in, and not to put you on the spot, but she had asked if we could possibly talk about students who are not signing into Canvas, are not corresponding with their instructors. Where are they after our extended spring break? Kind of, was there a university action or pull to, work with these students and find out where they are, or, kind of what was the message or what's going on there? And I think since then, Dr. Smith had also requested from Rick Sparks to see how many students have not signed into Canvas, just to get an idea of how many students were not even interacting with that platform as well. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you said that there were only 2 students who have not signed into Canvas since returning from extended spring break. So, I don't know if there are others in here who've experienced those issues, or Tasha, if you wanted to add on to any of what I had said, since you guys are kind of experiencing that in the College of Engineering.
One thing I'll say
Yes.
real quick, one thing I'll say before Tasha gets on. The other thing, because we were really, really shocked to find that there were only 2 students who had not. I mean, we didn't believe the data. And so it was looked at a couple of times. So now what we're doing, another level of analysis will be to compare the level of activity. So there are some folks who are looking at the level of activity of students on the 10 days prior to spring break compared to level of activity 10 days later or whatever. So when we get that, I don't know how they're setting the threshold, but when there is a significant difference identified, then we will have a list of students who may not be as active as they were previous. And we'll figure out next steps from there once we see what the number looks like. So just wanted to update you on that. Sorry, Tasha.
Oh, no problem. My faculty were saying that most of them have anywhere from 2 to 5 students, and they're teaching probably a total of around a 250 student teaching load. So they have anywhere from 2 to 5 students that are not logging onto Canvas. They've sent them emails. They're not responding to them. One faculty, though, has 23. And she's teaching our first intro to engineering class, and the majority of the population in that are students that are trying to get into engineering. So I don't know if that's the differentiating reason for that, but she's kind of trying to figure out what to do. She's a little bit freaked out about how does she handle that large of a volume of students. The way that we had been approaching it originally was to submit a VTE so that at least someone was aware that the student wasn't being active, and then we could at least track to see if they're just not being active in that class or if it's across multiple classes. But now as that number is continuing to increase, it's getting really hard to handle since only one person in the college deals with that. So I was just looking for recommendations on should we submit VTEs, or is there something different we should be thinking about?
So we did talk about this issue amongst the associate deans, and generally speaking, I think the answer is, sorry, I'm stalling because I'm trying to remember what the answer was. Oh, in general, we're going to just proceed with how we would have handled this under any set of circumstances. If a faculty member doesn't have any students to show up, then they can be whatever they would have done before. And then yes, this case, yes, it would probably be to submit a VTEers. I know that most of the associate deans have expressed that they still want the opportunity to intervene. And then we also have sort of a support mechanism behind that in particular colleges, number one, if the flow becomes too demanding, there are things that we can do to look at that. But also, if we aren't getting any response from the students, then we can move it on to the next level, being the Dean of Students Office. So basically what I'm saying is we'll use the same mechanism that we have used in the past. Now, what I will say is that data, the reason that we were trying to look at the data across the institution was, had we have identified a population of students that were not logged into Canvas, we in transitional advising were preparing to do an outreach effort institutionally to those students. But when that didn't pan out, that's when we decided to go back to this population of students whose activity has decreased. Now, again, if we can find and identify a significant population there, again, transitional advising will be willing to step up and do some sort of campaign or intervention to try to reach these students to find out what's going on, or as you said before, just even being able to tell if this is just this one class that they're experiencing this in, or is it a pattern for that student across all. So we're kind of in a wait and hold pattern, but for now, I don't want to say don't do anything. I would say for now, they should be sent through a VTEers.
Okay, thank you.
If anything changes, I will let you know. Because again, even before, when we get the data back about the difference in activity and have a better sense of volume, I may end up coming back to you all to say this is going to be handled at the college level or whatever, based on what the associate deans decide, if that makes sense. Are there others who are experiencing issues with a high number of students not falling off the grid? Surprisingly, we've heard of a few faculty who've gone off the grid.
So Kim, this is Christy. I've gotten probably 13 to 15 VTEers reports. And while it's not specifically saying the student hasn't logged into Canvas, what they're saying is the student has not submitted anything to Canvas. So if there were a way that you could run that search a little bit deeper, if they've logged into Canvas, whoopee. But if they're not interacting in any meaningful way with Canvas, then.
And that's what the point of it's difficult to pull data from Canvas in this regard. So that's why they're going back to look at the level of activity pre and post, looking for a significant difference, and that would identify to us folks who we may need to look out for whatever. So yes, we are looking at other ways to analyze or get data from that. I believe I don't even know who's doing it. Rick has a team that's looking at the data. All right. Guess there are no more questions on that one. Lauren, did you have any other items?
So no other specific items except for I was just going to show again, get over here and share my screen, our FAQ page that keeps on growing. Due to the questions that we're getting on our Google form that's on our website. So our FAQs related to the grade options is what we have really been focusing on based on any questions that have come from you all. And so if you hadn't had a chance to come here and look at these, we're continuously looking at those questions though and getting answers, even though it may take us a little bit because it might depend on contacting other offices and how these different grade options are going to impact different student populations. But we're continuously adding them here to our frequently asked page. We also have, I want to say that the link is here on the virtual resources under for academic advisors, where we have our virtual town halls that are pinned over here on the right. We do have submit student questions. So if you come across in your advising sessions, any questions that students are asking in regards to the new grading options, then go ahead and submit those there if you don't have the answer to it or can't find it. We also have updated since the new website came out of the beginning date that a student can change the grading options, which I believe is the 20th. And we are also waiting on the registrar's office to provide us tutorials, whether it's a video or screenshots, on how a student actually goes about making those changes in the registration system. They're having to do some configurations on the back end and test it to make sure that it is 100% before they're able to make us any kind of tutorials or screenshots. But again, we wouldn't necessarily need those until the 20th, and they're aware of that, so they're trying to get that together as quickly as possible.
Can you put that page back up for a second? There were
Oh,
a couple
yep.
things that I was reminded of as you were talking. So can you scroll down to where they submit the questions?
Right here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. I just wanted to thank you all for submitting the questions. Again, the intent was to submit questions that you have received from your students or that you would anticipate receiving from your students. So please continue to submit those, and I'm working as quickly as I can to develop answers and then make sure that those answers are approved by whomever most appropriate. One of the things I do want to say is that a few folks have been submitting their own advising questions, like I have a student in this situation, blah, blah, blah. If we could, and that's been good still, but if you could just send those directly to me, that would be better than putting them in this particular portal. I have still been answering them, and a lot of times they're very specific or individual questions about, for example, a student needing a 2.0, that's a university requirement to graduate. And so they were depending on getting a B this semester to get them there, but they choose a no grade option. That's a real specific one, and we're working on it, but we would not put a frequently asked question up there for that one because it's probably going to be deferred to an associate dean level. But for those of you who have sent me questions that were pretty specific, I've been trying to call back and answer those questions, or I'm sorry, email those individuals directly because it's so specific to that person. I don't want to open up a can of worms and put stuff that may not be related to other folks on there. One of the questions that did come to me, I want to share with you, financial aid and the student satisfactory academic progress. If a student has a contract right now and the contract dictates that they have a certain GPA or something, how is that going to be impacted if they choose the credit, no credit option? I did get an answer back, but it is like so many different parts. If this happens, this is the outcome. So what I have asked them to do is to put that in their frequently asked questions page. So you hopefully soon, they couldn't give me a timeline of when that will happen, but they should be developing some frequently asked questions around the credit, no credit option and satisfactory academic progress. Basically, there are some situations where the credit, no credit won't matter. There are other situations where they will have to have a specific GPA threshold. So that will be coming. I'm trying to think if there was anything else related to this. You can unshare it, Lauren, thank you. Yeah, that's all I can think of right now. I do have a number of frequently asked questions that I've just gotten finalized, so I'll be sending those over to Shanae, and hopefully those will be posted, if not today, sometime tomorrow. So please continue to keep checking there, because that's probably my full-time job right now, is getting that stuff up there. Any other questions for us? So Lauren, remember the idea I gave you about next time? Have you started to have conversations with folks about that?
I have not.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a heads
Yep.
up that those of you who are in have restricted majors, I'm starting to get a lot of questions about that. I know that all the restricted majors have already given considerable thought to how the credit, no credit option is going to work. And I believe everyone has a pretty much developed no harm to student kind of process. But I'm hoping that for our next town hall, we can invite the representatives from those restricted majors to explain to us how they're going to be evaluating students at the end of the semester based on the credit, no credit option. So I thought it would be better for those individuals to describe it than for Lauren or I to try to figure that out. So hopefully all of you wonderful people will agree. You'll have just probably a few minutes to go through it, but it'd be great maybe if you had a PowerPoint slide or a handout to accommodate, but we will be asking if at all possible to have a representative doing that, because that seems to be a question that's pressing for a lot of students wanting to transition into restricted majors. All right, any other questions? I don't want to hold you unnecessarily. We kind of got through everything a little quicker than we thought today. Awesome. Well, thank you all very much. Again, keep the questions coming. If you do have advising specific questions, you can send those directly to me or to Lauren, and we will work on those. But any of the student questions, please continue to submit them through the portal or the survey that was created. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day.